Hi everyone, we are from Group 2 and would like to present you about assessing speaking. We are students of Major Program in English Education and lectured by Dr. Ismail Petrus MA and Prof. Dimroh Ihsan MA PhD. Our group members consist of Nurul Maskana, Nanda Nadia, and Fanny Tifano. Please pay attention and enjoy the video.
Hi, I'm Nurul Maskana. As what had been mentioned before, our group will discuss about assessing speaking, and I will explain about basic types of speaking, micro and macro skills of speaking, and designing assessment tasks for speaking, imitative and intensive speaking. Last meeting, we have already discussed about assessing listening. In assessing listening, there are 5 assessments of performance tasks, and in assessing speaking, there are also 5 basic types of speaking that will be assessed. First is imitative speaking. In imitative speaking, the assessment will assess the imitation of a word or phrase, which is known as pronunciation. The second one is intensive speaking. In intensive speaking, the assessment is about the production of short or stretches of oral language. And the third one is responsive. In responsive, the assessment includes the interaction and task comprehension. And then the fourth one is interactive. In interactive, the assessment will assess longer than the responsive, which is the social interaction. And then the fifth is extensive speaking. In extensive speaking, the assessment is for the monologue, or for example the oral presentation, speech, and storytelling. Now, let's discuss about micro and macro skills of speaking. Micro skills means producing the smaller chunks of language, including phonemes, morphemes, words, collocations, and phrasal verbs. Where macro skills means the speakers focus on the larger elements, including fluency, discourse, function, style, cohesion, nonverbal communication, and strategic options. There are 3 important issues in designing oral tasks. First, concurrent involvement of the additional performance of oral comprehension and possible reading. Second, elicitation prompts achieves its aims as closely as possible. And third, carefully specify scoring procedures for a response. Now let's discuss about designing assessment tasks. First is imitative speaking. In a simple imitation task, the test takers will repeat the stimulus, whether it is a pair of words, a sentence, or even a question. For example, the test takers will hear, repeat after me, beat, bat. I bought a boat yesterday. Do you like coffee? When did you go on vacation? Well, for the scoring scale of the imitative speaking, there are 3. First is 2. When the test takers answer or repeat the pronunciation correctly, or it is comprehensible, the test takers will get 2. And if the test takers can partially pronounce the words or sentence, they will get 1, and 0 if the test takers is silent or seriously incorrect pronunciation. An example of test uses imitative is phone-pass test. Phone-pass test has supported the construct validity of its repetition task, not just for a test taker's phonological ability, but also for discourse and overall production ability. The phone-pass test elicits computer-assisted oral production over a telephone. Test takers will read aloud, repeat sentences, say words, and answer the questions with a downloadable test sheet as a reference. Test takers are directed to telephone a designated number and listen for directions.
These are the test specifications of one-pass tests.
Now, let's discuss about designing assessment tasks for intensive speaking. There are 5 tasks for intensive speaking. First is the rapid response task. Second, read aloud task. Third, sentence or dialogue completion task. Fourth, picture cue task and translation task. Well, let's discuss it one by one. Okay, the first one is the rapid response task. In this type of task, the test administrators elicit a particular grammatical form or a transformation of a sentence. Such tasks are clearly mechanical and not communicative, but they do require minimal processing of meaning in order to produce the correct grammatical output. For example, is here. The second one is reading aloud task. In assessing reading aloud task, the test takers will read a long paragraph or 2 paragraphs, and the assessment will assess the pronunciation and the fluency. And here is the scoring system. Next, another technique for targeting intensive aspects of language requires test takers to read dialogue in which one speaker's line have been omitted. The test takers are first given time to read through the dialogue to get its gist and to think about appropriate lines to fill in. Then, as the tape, teacher or test administrator produces one part orally. The test taker's response. Okay, here is an example. Another way for assessing intensive performance of speaking is picture cue task. Pictures may be very simple, designed to elicit a word or a phrase. Some words more elaborate and busy or composed of a series that tells a story or incident. Okay, here is an example of picture cue task.
Okay, this is the example of intensive speaking picture cue task of minimal period.
The last assessment of intensive speaking is translation. Translation is a well-proven communication strategy for learners for a second language. As an assessment procedure, the advantages of translation lie in its control of the output of the test taker, which of course means the scoring is more easily specified. Well, that's all from me. Thank you very much for your good attention. The next material will be explained by Fanny Pisani.
The next is responsive speaking. As it has been explained briefly in the beginning of the video about basic types of speaking, responsive speaking assessment is involving brief interaction with an interlocutor and only limited to very short conversations, such as standard greetings, small talks, simple requests and commands, and so on. Examples of tasks to assess responsive speaking are: first, question and answer. The questions in this task can vary from the simplest one, like, what is this called in English? Where this question is intensive or clear in its purpose. It intends to elicit an obvious correct response. To more complex question, like, what are the steps government should take, if any, to stem the rate of deforestation in tropical countries? And remember, questions in this task usually need merely short answer, like a few sentences at most. In general, there are 2 types of responsive questions. Firstly, question eliciting open-ended responses. The examples of questions asked usually are: what do you think about the weather today? What do you like about the English language? Why did you choose your current major? What kind of strategies have you used to help you learn English? Or several questions also can be situationally linked, and it will be like this. Have you ever been to United States before? What other countries have you visited? Why did you go there and what did you like best about it? If you could go back, what would you like to do or see? And what country would you like to visit next and why? Another type of question is the questions expecting the questions back from the test takers. For instances, do you have any questions for me? Or if you could interview a popular person like actress or singer, what would you like to ask that person? Then the test takers respond with questions. The second task is giving instructions and directions. This kind of speaking task can be done by using a stimulus or context that provides opportunities for the task takers to engage in a relatively extended stretch conversation, to be very clear and specific, and to use appropriate discourse markers and connectors. The samples of questions are: please describe how you make a typical dish from your country. Or, what is a good recipe for making pempek, for example? Or, how do you upload a file on the Google Drive? Then, test takers respond with appropriate instruction or directions with at least 5 to 6 sentences. In this kind of test, impromptu delivery is expected with a minute of preparation time. In other words, it will be better if the test takers did not prepare for the topics asked in advance. And another task for responsive speaking is paraphrasing. This is where the test takers will read or hear a few sentences, like 3 to 5 sentences, and produce a paraphrase of the sentence. Or in other words, it can be said that they are asked to retell the story with their own words. And this is the example of a text that the test takers may hear or read. Alright, enough about responsive speaking. Now we are going to move to interactive speaking assessment. Interactive speaking. So, what differentiates between responsive speaking and interactive speaking is the length and complexity of the interaction, in which interactive speaking takes longer time and quite more complex. Interactive speaking can take the two forms of transactional language, which purpose is exchanging information, or interpersonal exchange, which purpose is maintaining social relationship. Let's take a look at these three dialogues. Among these three dialogues, A and B were transactional language and C was interpersonal exchanges. In interpersonal exchanges, oral production can become pragmatically complex with the necessity to speak in casual style and use colloquial language, ellipsis, slang, humor, and other sociolinguistic conventions. Next, we will go to the task to assess interactive speaking. First, interview. When oral production assessment is mentioned, the first thing that may come to mind is an oral interview, where a test administrator and a test taker sit down in a direct face-to-face exchange and proceed through a protocol of questions and instructions. The interview, which may be tape recorded for re-listening, is then scored on one or more parameters such as accuracy in pronunciation and or grammar, vocabulary usage, fluency, sociolinguistic or pragmatic appropriateness, task accomplishment, and even comprehension. Interviews can vary in length from perhaps 5 to 45 minutes, depending on their purpose and context. Every effective interview contains a number of mandatory. According to Cannell, 1984, in interviews, test takers will perform at their best if they are led through at least 4 stages. First, warm up. Warm-up is the phase where the interviewer tells the mutual introductions to help the test takers become comfortable with the situation. This phase can take 1 or 2 minutes and not scored. This is the example of the warm-up phase in a real test. Second, level check. Through a series of pre-planned questions, the interviewer stimulates the test takers to respond using expected or predicted forms and functions. If, for example, from previous test information, grades, or other data, the test takers has been judged to be a level 2 speaker, the interview's prompts will attempt to confirm this assumption. The responses may take a very simple or very complex form depending on the entry level of the learner. Questions are usually designed to elicit grammatical categories such as subject-verb agreement, discourse structures such as a sequence of events, vocabulary usage, and or sociolinguistic factors like politeness, convention, or formal-informal language. This is the example of the level check phase in the real test. Third, probe. Probe questions and prompts challenge test takers to go the heights of their ability to extend beyond the limits of the interviewer's expectation through increasingly difficult questions. Responses to probe questions may be scored or may be ignored if the test taker displays an inability to handle such complexity. This is the example of the probe phase in a real test. Fourth, wind down. This final phase of the interview is simply a short period of time during which the interviewer encourages the test taker to relax with some easy questions, sets the test taker's mind at ease, and provides information about when and where to obtain the test result. This part is not scored, and this is the example of the wind down phase in a real test. Then, the second type of interactive speaking assessment is role-play. Role-playing is one of the famous activities in communicative language teaching approach to give students freedom to be creative in their linguistics output. The example of the activity is giving a situation, such as pretend that you are a tourist asking me for directions, or you are buying a necklace from me in a flea market and you want to get a lower price. Certain personal, strategic, and linguistic factors come into the foreground of the test taker's oral abilities. In this case, role-play can be controlled or guided by the test administrator or teacher, and this technique takes test takers into simple, intensive, and responsive levels to a level of creativity and complexity that approaches real-world pragmatics. Third, discussions and conversations. Here, discussion and conversation, if they belong to formal techniques, they will be difficult to specify and even more difficult to score. Therefore, the student's performance assessment should be carefully designed to suit the objectives of the observed discussion. But as an informal technique to assess learners, they offer a level of authenticity and spontaneity that other assessment techniques may not provide. Discussions may be especially appropriate tasks through which to elicit and observe such abilities as. Here we come to the last task, game. Here, games belong to informal speaking assessments. Any games that directly involve language production are allowed. The examples of games that can be employed, especially in the classroom, are Tinker Toy game, or also called as Lego block, crossword puzzles, information gap grid, city maps, and so on. Overall, the key of the games is to assess students' speaking by requiring them to communicate in English. Alright, the next part will be delivered by the last presenter, Nanda Nadia.
Hi, I am Nana Nadia. I'm from Group 2. So, I would like to continue my friend's presentation about assessing speaking, designing assessment types of extensive speaking. But before that, I would like to tell you about the oral proficiency interview, or we call it OPI. So, oral proficiency interview, or OPI, the flagship of a CTFL assessment is the oral proficiency interview, or OPI. The ACTFL OPI is an international recognized, valid, and reliable assessment of speaking proficiency. The ACTFL OPI is appropriate for a variety of assessment purposes, including entrance and exit requirements, placement, college credit, the American Council on Education of Foreign Language, program evaluation and performance, research and employment selection, and more. So, oral proficiency interview is the result of development of an assessment under the auspice of several education test service institutions and the American Council for Teaching Foreign Language, or ACTFL, which focuses on assessment of foreign language teaching for students with a professional assessment. OPI certifications are almost the same as those described above in the discussion of oral interview. In a series of structured assignments, OPI is carefully designed to acquire pronunciation, fluency, integrate ability, sociolinguistic, culture knowledge, grammar, and vocabulary. The performance assessed by the examiners was at 1 of 10 possible level on the ACTFL. A summary of this level is present in table 7.4. In the table of 7.4, there are 4 levels. The first one is superior, advanced, intermediate, and novice. In the superior level, speakers are ability to participate fully and effectively in conversation in formal and informal settings on the topic, provide a structured argument to explain and defend opinions, and develop effective hypotheses with in extended discourse. The last one is deal with a linguistic unfamiliar situation. In advanced level, speakers are ability to participate effectively in conversations in most informal and some formal settings on topics of personal and public interest, narrate and describe in major frame with good control of aspect, deal with effectively with anticipated complication through a variety of communicative device. In intermediate level, speakers are ability to participate to simple, direct conversation general, create with the language and communicate personal meaning to sympathetic, obtain and give information by asking and answering questions. The last one, in the novice level, the speakers are ability to respond to simple, the most common features of daily life, convey minimal meaning to intercolors experience in dealing with a foreigners by using isolated words, lists, and etc. And then the last one, satisfy a very limited number of immediate needs. Okay, as we discussed earlier, there are 4 levels that have been described. The first one, assessing speaking, reflects a unitary definition or ability as discussed earlier, focusing on skill in grammar, vocabulary, comprehension, fluency, and pronunciation. They also focus more on the overall task and on the skills needed to complete the task. And then the second, for the class assessment purposes, the FSI category more accurately describe the components of oral ability than the ACTFL holistic score. The third, ACTFL's requirement to specialized training make OPI less useful for the classroom adaptation. It has been mentioned above that for the purposes of OPI, it relies on a networks of administration having certified testers and paying significant fees to achieve tester status. So we are going to talk about designing assessment extensive speaking. So extensive speaking assignments involve a series of complex and relatively long discourse. They often have a variety of monologue, usually with a minimal verbal interaction. There are four kinds of assessment extensive speaking. The first one is oral presentation, the second one is picture code storytelling, the third one is retelling a story news event, the last one is translation of extended process. Oral presentation assessment. In the world of education, we as a student will get assignments in the form of presentation to deliver reports, papers, and others. Or in the world of presentation work regarding marketing plans, sales ideas, a new product design or method to improve marketing quality. Therefore, a summary of oral assessment technique would not be complete without considering extensive speaking assignments. Again, the rules for extensive assessment must apply. First, define criteria. Second, assign appropriate tasks. Third, obtain optimal results. And fourth, establish practical and reliable assessment procedure. And again, regarding is a key grading challenge. For oral presentation, a checklist is a common means of assessment or evaluation. Holistic scores are also used for their practically but may obscure the variability of performance across some subcategories, particularly the two main components of content and delivery. There is an example of a checklist for an oral presentation prepared at an intermediate or advanced level. Picture cue storytelling assessment. One of the most common techniques for eliciting spoken communication is through picture, photograph, diagram, and chart. We have looked at the elicitation device for extensive text, but at this level, we consider an image or series of images as a stimulus for a longer story or description. Look at the following series of the picture. Based on the picture, teacher will give the best takers any sequence of pictures and ask them to talk for a minute or about the relevant material. But as with any assessment of speaking ability, the purpose for generating narrative discourse must be clear. In the example above, did you test the spoken vocabulary like girls, oral alarm, coffee, telephone, wet, it, and etc. For the time, like before, after, and when. For conjunction, then, that, and so. For the past tense or irregular verb like walk, drank, and rang, and or for fluency in general, if you bring out certain grammatical or discourse features, you can add a hint like tell the story these pictures. Use the past tense verbs, and your assessment criteria should be clear about what you expect. Retelling a story news events assessment. In this type of text, the test takers hears or reads the story that are asked to be retold. The goals in providing such assignments vary from listening for comprehension at the original to be production of a number of features of spoken discourse or communicating sequence and relationship of events, patterns of stress and emphasis expression. In the case of dramatic stories, fluency and interaction with listener. Scoring, of course, must be met in the criteria in question. The last assessment in extensive speaking is translation or extended process. Translation of word, phrase, or short sentences are mentioned under in the intensive speaking category. Here, a longer text is present for the test taker to read the original language and then translate it into English. This text can take many forms like dialogue, product assembly, instruction, story, or play, film synopsis, instruction for how to find something on map, and other genre. But there is a downside to this assessment that translating longer text is a highly specialized skill for which some people post bachelor degree. To assess non-specialist spoken language proficiency at such skills may be completely invalid, especially if the test taker is not involved in translation at this level. Therefore, the scoring criteria should consider not only the goal or stimulating translation, but also possible errors unrelated to spoken production ability. I think that's all for extensive speaking, and then back to the moderator.
Well, that's all from our presentation today. Thank you very much for your great attention, and let's move to the question and answer session.